Alright guys, M-Tech Guy here, and today we're going to take a look at carrying out a preventative maintenance job on the Little 1 Series E87 130i. We're going to be looking at changing out the belts, pulleys and tensioners on the N52 engine. Alright, so why am I looking at changing out the belts, pulleys and tensioners today? Because the belt seems okay, it's only just over a year old, the pulleys aren't making any noise, and the tensioner seems to be doing its job okay, but it's all going to be in the name of preventative maintenance. Now, I've not owned this car for too long, I've got no idea what brand of belt the previous owner put on it just over a year ago, and I'm going to assume that it's still the original pulleys and tensioners on there from the factory, so it's likely that they're getting to the point where they're getting fairly worn, they could be coming towards the end of their life. Now, if you neglect to change these parts out on your N52 engine and you wait for them to just fail, what will happen is that belt will become so worn and so frayed over time that it'll snap, it'll break, and then it'll cause all kinds of carnage in here. It'll get stuck in your electric fan, it'll slice through your coolant hoses, and if you're out on the road, it's likely you're going to overheat your engine. Also, it can damage the underside of your hood, and the same goes if the pulleys fail. If the bearings and the pulleys fail, they can seize up, that can cause the belt to get damaged and come off. Same with your tensioner, they do get weak over time, and if it's not working optimally, then the same again, that's going to cause you to lose your belt also, which you do not want to do. And another common issue that can contribute to the failure of the drive belt is the oil filter housing gasket do leak frequently on these engines. Mine's been done just before I bought the car, so pretty lucky there, and that's why they changed the belt out at the same time, because what happens is that oil will find its way down to the front of the engine and it'll end up soaking your drive belt, and of course that oil will eat into the rubber and deteriorate your drive belt until it eventually fails. Now, these N52 engines do have another unique failure point. It's very strange, but what can happen if your belt does end up starting to shred, starting to deteriorate, it can end up getting hooked behind the crank pulley down the bottom there, and the crank pulley will just drive it into the oil seal, and eventually it'll start shredding and it'll get forced through the crank seal and into your engine, and you'll end up with shredded rubber throughout your oil passages of your engine. Then you've got a right mess on your hands, so you want to avoid that at all costs. And that's another reason why we're carrying out this preventative maintenance job today. We're going to get a new set of parts in there, so that'll give us peace of mind moving forward. Alright, let's go and check out what parts we're going to be fitting today. Alright, so all the bits and pieces we're going to need to get the job done today. Of course, we've got the drive belt itself. I've gone for a Continental brand, really good quality, and it is actually the OEM manufacturer for BMW. Then we've got the pulley here, I've gone for the INA brand. I've found that these are really good quality, some of the best in the business out there for the BMWs. There are cheaper alternatives out there, you'll often find these on eBay and Amazon, but speaking from experience, I've tried them before, they don't last that long, they do wear much quicker than the INA brand. These are really good quality, so it's worth going for the INA brand, and the same again for the tensioner itself. Now, with the N52 engine, you want to be making sure that you get the mounting bolt with the tensioner, because they are a stretch fit, they are an aluminium bolt, so you can't reuse your old one, so just make sure your tensioner comes with that one. Again, INA brand, all comes as a package. And as always, I'll leave the part numbers in the description below for this little lot. Alright, let's take a look at the steps required to get the job done. Alright, so even though we're working on a Little 1 Series today, changing out the belts, pulleys and tensioners on an N52 engine is going to be the same across any N52 engine. The only variation being is gaining access to the front of the engine here, where the parts live, depending on which BMW model you've got. But even with the slight variations, it's going to be more or less the same procedure, gaining access. So initially, we need to remove this air intake here, and then I think we'll remove the airbox too. It's probably unnecessary. You probably could do the whole job just with the air intake out of the way, but I think just for the sake of a couple of extra minutes, it'll give us that little bit of extra access. So let's get the airbox out of there too. So to remove the air intake here, there's 4 screws, and they take a T20 torque socket. So we'll get them removed now. Okay, so now that we've got the 4 screws removed, to be able to remove the air intake, we just need to uncouple this hose portion here. So just unclip it from the airbox itself. And grab a hold of it at the back and just lift it out. And then for the airbox itself, there's just 2 bolts here that take a 10mm socket. There's also a hose clamp down there that's clamping our air intake hose to the back of the airbox. And there's also a little electrical connectors to disconnect for the MAF sensor. So we'll unclip the MAF sensor connector, we'll loosen that air intake hose and remove the 2 bolts. Okay, so now we can remove the airbox from the car. It's just a case of grabbing hold of it, lift it up and out, and then just pull that intake hose off the back as it's coming out. Alright, so now we've got access to all our belts, pulleys and tensioners at the front of the engine here. So obviously you can see the belt here. This one here, that's the belt tensioner. And then over here, that's the idler pulley just underneath the alternator pulley there. Now before we go any further, as you can see, this belt takes quite an interesting route around all the pulleys and tensioners and idlers there. So it is worth making a little bit of a sketch before you go any further, and then that's going to give you something to work on when you reinstall the new belt. So I normally just tear the lid off the tensioner box, just make a little crude sketch there. That's going to point me in the right direction when we stick the new belt back on. So first off, we need to release the tension on the tensioner here to be able to remove the belt, and we do that with a T60 Torx fitting, and that goes just in there. You see the star pattern on there, look. So we're going to put a T60 Torx fitting in there with a long breaker bar, and we're going to turn it clockwise, and that's going to release the tension off the belt, and then we'll slip the belt off, get it out of there. There's the old belt. Doesn't look too bad actually. Only a few months old. Looks like they stuck a Continental in there too. But anyhow, we'll get a brand new one in there just for peace of mind. Okay, so now that we've got the drive belt out of the way, we can now move on to the tensioner. We'll get that removed from the front of the engine. Now there's just one bolt holding this. It just lives right there. And that takes a E14 Torx socket. And there's the old tensioner. Okay, so next up we'll move on to the idler pulley right here. So we need to pop off the plastic cap on the front there with a pocket screwdriver, and then that'll give us access to the mounting bolt. And the mounting bolt there, that takes a regular 16mm socket. And there's the old idler pulley. And if we take a bit of a closer look at the old idler pulley, See if we give it a spin here. That just spins and spins and spins. So that's identifying that that bearing's seen a reasonable amount of wear throughout its life. It's got a bit of a rumble to it too. And if we compare that to the new one, give that a spin, you can see that's nice and tight, nice and smooth, solid, and completely noise free. So good time to get this changed out today, certainly. Alright, so now we're ready to reinstall the new idler pulley. And that new INA idler pulley also came with a new plastic dust cap, so I'll pop that on now. Alright, so next up we're ready to install the new belt tensioner, and as you can see this one comes pre-installed with a little grenade pin here, so this is just holding it pulled back a tiny bit like we did with the breaker bar to get the belt off. So this will just give us an opportunity once it's on to slide the new belt on there, and then what we need to do is just pull it back slightly and remove that pin before we go any further, but we'll take a look at that when we get to it. So we're going to feed this down into position, and we're going to push it against the front of the engine there and just make sure it's seated correctly before we feed the new mounting bolt in. We're going to take our new aluminium bolt, we're just going to put it in finger tight for now. Okay, so we've got the bolt just snugged up against the tensioner pulley, just finger tight. And then next up, we're going to take our little torque wrench and we're going to torque this to 25 Newton meters, followed by a 90-degree turn. And then that's just going to squeeze that aluminium bolt stretched to fit. There's the 25 Newton meters. There we go, that's the 90. Alright, so now that we've got the new pulley and tensioner in position, we can now install the new belt. And this is where the future me thanks the past me, because we've got our little sketch here to see which way we're going round with that new belt. Now, I'll be honest here, out of all the BMW engines I've worked on in the past, this has got to be the most awkward, tightest belt to get on, I reckon. We're getting there. Okay, so I've got the belt in position now, and before we go any further, just want to run your fingers around each pulley and tensioner just to make sure that belt's nice and centered on each pulley. And we'll just take another glance at the sketch just to do a double check, make sure it's all looking like it's round the correct way. Alright, so next up we're ready to remove the little tensioner grenade pin there. So to be able to do that, we're going to take our T60 Torx fitting, just going to insert it into the new tensioner, and we're just going to turn it slightly clockwise just to release the tension off that pin, pull the pin out, and then we're going to ease it back slowly, and then that'll tension the belt up for us. So that's everything in position now, and our belt's all tensioned up. Now, before we go any further, it is just worth taking a few seconds just to double check that now that belt's tensioned, it is sitting nice and centered on the pulleys while we've got access, and then we'll reinstall the earbox and the air intake. Earbox back in, and as it's going in, we're going to reconnect that intake hose at the back there. Mounting bolts back in. Tighten up the hose clamp. Reinstall the MAF sensor electrical connector. That's the earbox secured. Now we can move on to the intake itself. Slip on the hose. And then we can reinstall the 4 screws. Alright, so there we have it guys, that's all back together now, and that's how you go about changing your belts, pulleys and tensioners on your N52 engine. If you found the video interesting or useful, don't forget to give it a like, and make sure you go and check out the rest of my YouTube channel for more BMW DIY content. Consider subscribing if that's your cup of tea. I'm MTech Guy, thanks a lot for watching.